A blessed day to everyone. We are now in the subject Social Dimensions of Education, which is the EDUC 40. For today, we will be discussing the first module in Social Dimensions of Education. Now, when we talk about of the subject, giving emphasis on the term dimensions, we are after with the different areas or phases of society in relation to education. So what do we expect from this module? First, we will differentiate the various social science theorists. Second, explain the relationship between the conflict, consensus, functionalism, and interactionist theories and educational systems as well. We will also determine how the various social theories affect the functions of a school. So let's begin. The first module will cover the introduction to social dimensions of education, plus the social science theories. And these are, first, the consensus and conflict, second, structural functionalism, and the third one is the interaction theories. So within this module, our focus will be the three social science theories, such as consensus and conflict, structural functionalism, and interaction theories. Okay, look at these people. Who are they? What are they looking for and what are they talking about? Do you know who they are? They are the sociologists, the people who are interested in studying human behavior in relation to others. Unlike with the psychologists are only interested with individual human behavior. Now, the sociologists, these people, see education as one of the major institutions that constitute the society. And when they talk about of social science theories, these theories will guide research and policy formulation in the sociology of education. At the same time, it will provide logical explanation for why the things happen the way they are or the way they do. These theories will also help the sociologists understand the true meaning of educational system in order for us to improve and upgrade the educational system too. Okay, to understand fully this different concept of social science theories, let us discuss them one by one. Okay, now according to Dahrendorf in 1959, there are two phases of the society. You try to look at the picture. The society, the word society is properly written. Therefore, there is consensus. While the other one is written in an inverted way. And look at the face, he is proning. In that case, it is conflict. So within the society, we cannot avoid to have these two phases of the society, which are the consensus and the conflict. It's just like the two sides of the coin. One side will always complement the other side. We will not have conflict without consensus, and we will not have consensus without conflict. Okay, now let us differentiate the two. Consensus, you shared the same norms and values, like in your families. If you are harmoniously living with one another, and there is no such thing as trouble or problem, and you are sharing the same norms and values, there is always consensus. But if one dominates somebody or some social group, even in your family. Like, for example, the mother or the father is the one dominating the group or the family. So it can cause conflict, most especially if their principles and their ideas are against you. It is applicable in all institutions where there will be dominance of some social groups. Next one. When we are talking of social change, for consensus, it is a slow and orderly fashion. Meaning, if you will initiate a change in a certain group, you do it slowly so that everyone can follow and understand it. But if that change will be imposed rapidly and disorderly, conflict will surely occur. So that is it. Okay, next one. In consensus, your main focus is the social order based on tacit agreement. Do you know what tacit agreement means? When we say tacit agreement, you don't have to express it in words. You don't have to be outspoken, but it is just only based or understanding between one of you or among all of you uh, in such a way that you can go with the flow. So meaning in Tagalog, it is pakiramdaman. Okay, that is consensus to avoid any conflict. But in conflict, the social order, there's a social order because it is always based on the manipulation and control of dominant groups. So no one within the group cannot react because they are being manipulated and controlled. And there is still conflict. Okay. Now for consensus, it examines value integration to society. One value is integrated with another value. Let's say I have my own value. I value honesty, you value simplicity, you value humility, or you value your family, you value a lot of things, but these things are all integrated and they are being done in such a way that we can produce order or we can produce peace and stability. But if it is conflict, they don't care about those values of one another. What is important here is the personal interests of the one who is in power or of the one who is in position. And there is always coercion, meaning you are being forced to follow based on the personal interest of someone or some groups. That can cause conflict. Okay, in consensus, there is a state of society based on general agreement, and we call it equilibrium. So there is balance. If everything is balanced, there will be order since you agreed with one another. But if one will disagree, clash will come out. It can be covert or overt. When you clash, when you hate someone, and when you disagree, sometimes you don't show it. Sometimes you don't want to express it. But within you, in this case, you are in trouble or you are engaged with conflict. Now that is already covert. But if you express it in talking harsh words, in throwing something, boxing, or anything, which is a violent reaction, that is quite being overt. So conflict is always occur when there is disagreement or clash. Okay, now for their interests, the interest of consensus is the maintenance or continuation of social order. But for conflict, it is how societal institutions help to maintain the privileges of some groups. And what are these societal institutions that I'm talking about? One of the major thing here is the school. as a part of the societal institution. We have the government, we have the church, the politics, non the government, and even the economy, and even the media. So many things. So in conflict, they are much interested on how they can maintain such privileges. Okay, consensus, there is social order stability because everything is socially regulated. They have the rules, but the rules had been approved by everyone and they agreed on that and they do it properly. But in conflict, if there will be struggle of social class, there is always dominance and power. So there is no equality. That creates conflict. Even in the distribution of resources, even in giving privileges. If one doesn't receive anything, so in that case, it can create conflict. Okay? Now look at this picture. A simple picture that will show you a consensus and conflict theory. If you will try to look at the picture, it has a consensus. Why? Because it seems that they used to understand one another, and simply they are very close. Even you yourself, you've got your friends, you've got your family, you've got your loved ones. And if you are always in good terms, consensus occur. But if something happened, you are being expressive with your face, the distance, and you don't even talk with one another, that is a covert one, that means there is a problem. And that means it can cause conflict. So just a simple symbolism on how to show a concept or the concept of consensus and conflict theory. Now, there is a question that I'm going to ask you that you're about to answer as a sort of an activity. How do you think schools contribute to the unequal distribution of people into jobs wherein more powerful members of society maintain the best positions and the less powerful groups, oftenly minority groups, are allocated to lower ranks in the society? Think about it and reflect. Another question is, what is the role that education plays in maintaining the prestige, power, and economic and even the social position of the dominant group in the society? So our emphasis here is education. Mind you, I mentioned a while ago that education plays a very important role in our society. Okay, let me continue. There are so many social theorists, and some of these popular are Karl Marx and Max Weber. Who is Karl Marx? Karl Marx is known for his class conflicts. He emphasized the role of human beings in social conflict and explained change as emerging from crisis between human beings and society. So if there is crisis between human beings and their society, conflict will occur. Okay, like for example, right now in this pandemic time, there are many people who did not receive the you did not receive anything as support from the government, and maybe there is an equal distribution of this ayuda or help coming from the government. So what happened? There are so many people who are acting against the government or reacting against the LGU because there is an equal distribution of supports or resources. So it's the human being, no? The human being creates the social conflict. They argued that this theory was characterized by class conflicts or the conflict between the bourgeois. When we talk about bourgeois, these are the rich owners, and the proletariat, which are considered the poor workers. That is why in our society, you will see there is really a big gap between the rich and the poor. That characterize the class conflicts. And what about Max Weber? Who is Max Weber? Max Weber argues that the schools teach and maintain particular status culture. And when we talk of status culture, it refers to the groups in society with similar interests and positions in the status hierarchy. Let's say a group of education students. These students are, of course, will in the near future will be teachers. So a group of teachers, a group of engineers, a group of architects, a group of doctors, and so many. They are created their own status culture based on their own similar interests and the position they are handling in the society. Okay, as far as the school is concerned, or our education systems, they train individuals based on their own skills or specialties. They are being prepared as cultivated individuals. So therefore, those who stand above, no, above the others, they are getting and having that kind of superior knowledge and reasoning abilities. They will be having a good job, a good status, a good position in the society. Okay, now in this case, we can say that the schools really contribute, no, really teach and maintain that particular status culture. So remember these two individuals. These are popular in class, no, or class conflicts and the status culture, which are under the consensus and conflict theory. There are still some other people or theorists that are really interested in studying about the consensus and conflict, but these are the most prominent one. Okay, any question about the consensus and conflict? So let's proceed now to the second one. Okay, the second one is structural functionalism. When we look at the term structure, there is a form. When we say functionalism, there is a function, meaning each one of us within the society, we have a certain form. We are forming a certain form, like for example, a family, a government. That is an example of a structure. And its form has its own function. Now, who are these people who are interested in studying this structural functionalism? We have Talcott Parsons, Robert Menton, and some of their students and even followers. But in case of Parsons' structural functionalism, he has 4 functional imperatives for all action system. I mentioned action system. I mentioned the term system because when we say a system, it consists of different parts performing its own functions. So a system, as a structure, has many parts and each part has its own function. And we need these 4 functional imperatives in order to function or perform the action system. Now let us begin. Let us start first. Our acronym is AGIL. A-G-I-L. AGIL. Let us start from letter A, which is adaptation. For adaptation, that certain system must cope with external situational exigencies, meaning the system should adapt to the environment and the environment should adapt to its needs. Okay? What do I mean by that? I'm a person. I should know how to adapt with my environment, but my environment should also meet my needs. Kasi kahit mag-adapt ka, but your needs are not being addressed or satisfied, we cannot adapt fully. That kind of system should be satisfied or met. Okay? Now, another one, aside from adaptation, we have the second one, which is G, goal attainment. In the society, we are having our own function. We do not do things without any reason. We have our goal. We have our primary purpose. So for goal attainment, after you have adapted yourself to your external exigency or environment, you must determine or identify your purpose or primary goal for you to function. Third one is the I, integration. In the case of integration, you must regulate the interrelationship of the component parts. For this, the interrelationship of its part referring to adaptation, how do you adapt, how do you attain your goal, and they should be integrated with one another. Because if you do not know, if you will not integrate yourself, you will not integrate the system with one another. If one part will malfunction, the system will not also function. So like in a certain group, you are just new in a group. So you have to adapt with the group. And the group will also adapt to you. Now you must know what is your purpose within the group. And even though you know that purpose within a group and you will not integrate with them, you will not correlate with them, there is no interrelationship with one another, the system will not still function. So that is the importance of integrations. The importance of integration. And then the last one, it's L, latency. Now a system must maintain and renew both the motivation of individual and the cultural patterns that create and sustain the motivation. Because if you will not set rules, if you will not set guidelines or a certain pattern for you to maintain and sustain that kind of motivation, this system will not function well. So I said these are imperatives, and when we say imperatives, they are really needed in order that action systems will function. So I repeat, adaptation, meaning you have to cope up with your external exigencies. Goal attainment, you have to define your primary goals. Integration, there should be an interrelationship of its component parts. And latency is maintaining the motivation, how to do it. There should be a certain pattern maintenance. Set goals, set policies that will keep the group in order. Okay? Okay. So, now in order for this Agile scheme function and adapt to action system, there are 4 systems to be considered. The very first one in adaptation function is the action system. Now, when we talk of action system, it refers to the behavioral organism. We are behavioral organism. We are the one acting, and we are also the one adapting and adjusting and transforming to the external world. So that is adaptation function in line with the action system. Second one, with the second scheme, which is the goal attainment. So as an individual, you have to define the system goals and how to mobilize the resources in order to attain your goals. That is the personality system. Performs the goal attainment. Define your goal and try to mobilize all the resources on how you're going to attain the goal. Third one is the integration function. So the term integration, always bear in mind the term interrelationship. And if there is interrelationship, there should always be a social system where you can cope with the integration function by controlling its parts. And lastly, for a latency function, when you provide the actors with the norms and values that motivate them for action, you are forming a culture. And that means there is a cultural system. So from the Agile scheme, we had this action system that makes the scheme possible or work. Repeat, action system goes with adaptation function. Personality system goes with goal attainment. Social system goes with integration function. And then the last one, cultural system, goes with latency function. So all the system, the general action system, will not function well if they are not integrated with one another. Okay? Okay. You look at this. You will see that the terms alter ego and the ego. For the social system, it begins at the micro level. And that micro level I am referring to is the interaction between your ego and alter ego. Now, when you say ego, it means yourself. There is your another self. If your self and another self, which is also you, you might be thinking of anything, your heart will be different, your mind will be different too. It doesn't goes together. And the relationship of yourself within your inner self doesn't match. They don't agree. They oppose. So there is a conflict. So if that will be the case, it is very hard for you to decide. It is very hard for the system to function. There should be consensus. Now, there are 4 key principles of the functionalist. And let's try to find out what are these principles I'm talking about. Let us start. Number 1 is a system should be interdependent. There should be interdependency, meaning one depends another. Okay? This means that every part, I repeat, every part of the society is dependent to some extent on other parts of the society, so that what happens at one place in the society has important effects elsewhere. Okay, let's have an example. In our school, it will not be called school without the teacher, without the students. How will you learn without the teacher? And how can we teach without the students? So we are interdependent with one another. And who will manage the schools? Now you might be saying that the janitor whose work is very simple, just saying just, do not say just, but their role is very important. Once the school becomes too messy and not healthy, everybody will also be affected because they will not be healthy and they will get sick. What about if the electrician won't be around? So there will be no light, no proper ventilation. So we are also affected. So each one will be affected because we are a system that is within the school system. If the government will not be giving us an important rules and regulations or guidelines or laws to be followed, it will become chaotic. So one depend with one another. The educational system from CHED, from the DepEd, if they will not properly implement it, all the schools will also be affected. The teacher, the parents, and the students per se will always be affected. Okay, next one. The functions of social structure. Each one of us has his own respective function being played in the society. So, in this case, you cannot exist without a functions. Each part of the social system exists. Why? Because you are serving your function. Now, when we talk of social structure, we are referring to the organization of the society, including its institution, its social position, and its distribution of resources. I repeat, okay? When I talk of social structure, it refers to the organization of the society. We have so many organizations in the society, including its institutions, its social positions, and its distribution of resources. But when we say culture, no, culture, it refers to the set of beliefs, our language, our rules, our values, and even the knowledge being held common in the members of a society. So we can have a social structure and we can form also the same culture. Okay. Third one, consensus and cooperation. There will be no consensus without cooperation. Do you agree? Even in your simple grouping, when you group and when you are about to form your groups, if there is always someone or two of the groups are always complaining and they do not want to go with the group, they are always against the group, there's always a continuous brainstorming, you cannot come up with a certain plan. And you will just be wasting your time, you will just be wasting your effort because there is no such thing as cooperation, so consensus will not be attained. Now, for the functionalist, they believe that inability to cooperate will paralyze the society, and people will devote more and more efforts to fighting one another rather than getting anything done. Kaya mahirap makaipod ang Pilipino. Ang daming nagrarally, ang daming nagko-complain, ang daming nagsasabi. Even in your, maybe you can also experience it in your organization in EDGE. While it will take a long time for you to plan and decide for something because you've got so many ideas that are quite contradicting. So that continuous contradiction, brainstorming will only paralyze your plan and nothing will not be doing well. So try to cooperate so that consensus will be attained. And lastly is the equilibrium. I mentioned this already a while ago that it is a characteristic of a society that has achieved a form that is best adapted to its situation. You can always achieve the form as long as you agreed with one another, as long as you already adapted yourself to the situation. And in that case, you already formed an equilibrium. Okay, so these are the 4 key principles in structural functionalism by Talcott or Parsons. They are the interdependency, functions of social structure, consensus and cooperation, and equilibrium. Is it clear? Okay. Let's move now to the last one. But before that, let me mention this social structure that I am referring to. These are the samples of social structures that I'm talking about. The different associations, schools, of course, the families, our neighbors, the banks, churches, government, media people, and so on and so forth. Okay, familiar with these faces? Have you seen their Ma'am Cory? Ma'am Cory is there. For education, education is considered the key institution in a meritocratic selection process. Do you agree on that? That basically, that education plays a very important role in when we say meritocratic selection process. Meritocratic. You are given a distinction, a recognition based on what you have attained in a certain education setup or in a certain school. You will be graduated as cum laude, a magna cum laude, and so on and so forth. Different recognitions that you can receive. It is always based on meritocratic selection process. Okay. Let me continue this. Now, schooling performs an important functions in the development and maintenance of modern democratic society, especially with regard to equality of opportunity for all citizens. Usually those who were not able to attend school, they couldn't understand what's going on with the society and they are being left behind. But there are people who are also resourceful enough, even though they were not able to attend school, but they know a lot of strategies on how to make life better and best for them. But generally, when you try to look at it, those out of school youth who are just having their time, spending their time outside and doing such thing that not that important thing that could help them to be progressive. Now, if they are attending a school, it has they have already it's also a great privilege in since it is a democratic country. We can attain equality and opportunity for all. In education, we said no child left behind. Education is accessible to all. That is why in elementary, in high school, in college, there is no longer tuition fee for public schools. So there is no reason to say that I cannot go to school because of the high tuition fees. What you need is just a courage, patience to do it, and strive more. Because I know everyone has always the opportunity to grow and develop into a successful individual. But do not forget, you might be schooled but not educated. What is the difference between the two? I said you are schooled but not educated. You are just within the school studying, chatting with friends, sharing, but you are not considered educated if all the learnings that you have from the school, most especially talking about the values, if you will not be applying it in yourself, in your family, or in the society. We have what we call a lifelong learning. You have to apply your learning in your real life to make it more authentic. So grab the opportunity. Now that you are studying, try to treasure everything that you are learning from the school and try to share it when you will become a real professional teacher someday. Okay? Now the last one, or this part is relating to interactionist theories, which is the last one. In general, when we talk of interactionist theories in the society, these are the people who are considered critics. Yung mga kritiko ba? They are critics and extensions of the functionalist and conflict perspective. They just want to study a lot of things, the smallest thing. They do not look at the big picture, but they just want to see what is within that big picture. What do I mean? Now, some people look at education, at the educational system in a big picture. This is it. But for those interactionist tourists, they want to make the commonplace strange. They want to study the everyday living of the students in the school or even the teacher and everyone else. Meaning, everything that has been taken for granted for the other people, for them, it is very important and they need to study it. How do students interact with one another? How come there are gifted students and how come there are disabled? Okay, the different levels of each individual, it's very important for them. They just want to study and to make all the common things strange for them. Okay? Now, in talking about of the macro sociology and micro sociology, for others, they are after with macro sociological aspect. Ito yung sinasabi kong big picture. But for the interactionists, they are after with the micro sociological. Ang gusto nila, yung deeper, the smaller, or the details of everything within that big picture. Okay, looking back the forest, they have seen the forest, but if you are a social interactionist, what you want is what is within the forest. What are those plants within the forest? What are the animals in the forest? How do plants relate with animals and animals with the plants? So that is it. They are more critics. They are more interested on how the things they are. Okay? Basically, there are two forms of social interactions. Two forms. The first one. Okay. The symbolic interactionism. When we say symbolic interactionism, it all started from Charles Horton and George Herbert Mead when an individual is related to society. They can relate to the society through ongoing social interactions. Meaning, our self is considered as socially constructed in relation to social forces and structures, and we are considered the product of ongoing negotiation of meanings. Meaning, it's very common for us to interact with one another. It's very common for us to deal with one another, to talk with one another, and we are using symbols here, which is language. We communicate through in the form of language. Okay? Now, so therefore, if it is a symbolic interactionism, it requires mental processes. You really need to think. You really need to express yourself either in the form of symbols, which is particularly language. But things became meaningful once it has been experienced by an individual. So I repeat, so symbolic interactionism or interaction requires mental processes. Okay, what about the other one? A non-symbolic interactionism. Now, according to Bloomer, there are two basic forms of social interaction. One does not involve thinking, the other one involves thinking. So therefore, the symbolic one, it involves thinking, while the non-symbolic one doesn't involve thinking. Now, there are three important premises on how this process came up from non-symbolic to symbolic. Let's have the first one. Every individual acts toward the things they encounter based on what those things mean to them. What do you mean by that? I myself, if I have seen a piece of wood, no, a piece of wood, kahoy, it might have a meaning for me as panggatong, but for a carpenter, it is not panggatong. No? It is being used to build a house. So a house, but for a fisherman, it is being used to make a boat. But for a sculptor, it means something that can make an art of it. So there are so many interpretations of a certain thing for an individual based on how you look at things. So iba-iba. Things in this context that I'm referring to, it can be objects, it can be people, it can be activities or situation. So may mga sitwasyon tayo na for you, it has a different meaning. Now let's say for example, you have seen someone talking with one another very close. You might be telling, they are best friends. They are intimate with one another. They have secrets. So we have so many things in mind on how we used to interpret that kind of situation, that kind of activities, or those kind of people. So that is the first one, the first premise. Second one, we learn what things, how, by observing how the other people respond to them through social interaction. Let's say, for example, have you seen when you shake hands, simple shaking hands, which is not advisable right now because it is pandemic, simple shaking hands. Now, if you do not know the meaning of shaking hands and you are in the other country or maybe in other country they do not know it, they will never know that shaking hands means getting friends with one another and greetings for one another. So a simple handshake is very symbolic in greeting Filipinos. But in some other country, it is not. Maybe in Japan, they just bow, having their two hands on their chest and saying that's a form of greetings. So your observation makes you learn the meaning of something. Okay? So meaning, and from the very first one, you interpret what you have seen based on your own perception, based on your own idea. Second one, you learn about that thing while you are observing how people respond to it. That is through social interaction. And lastly, the result of that ongoing interaction, the sounds, the gesture, the facial expression, and even our body postures dealing with others, it acquires symbolic meaning already that are being shared by people who belongs to the same culture. So meaning, if you have moved to some other place which has different culture from yours, there's a saying na, na-culture shock ako. Because their culture is entirely different from me. So their perception, their ideas are different from me. So at first, you will have your own idea on a certain situation, on a certain activity. But as you go along and you observe how people react on that situation, you learn how to adjust. And you learn that the meaning of that activities or the meaning of that situation already. It is through the result of the ongoing interaction with people. And that makes it symbolic. Okay? Like in my case, let me just have a short sharing. When we've been in Hong Kong one time, we ate in a certain restaurant. And I know when it is used to us that when we are thirsty, we have to ask water. So there's a glass of water. So we did a glass of water together with calamansi and together with the spoon and so on. So since we are new in that place, our perception, our reaction with the water is to drink it because it is a drinking water and we are eating. But once we are looking around in that restaurant, we have seen that they just put that kind of they put the spoon, they put the calamansi and everything there, and they did not drink it. So therefore, it is not a drinking water. And the way they are holding the glass is with their hands are being dipped with inside the glass. Nakalubog yon. So meaning, at first, it's awful. We cannot understand. It's very hard for us since we are just new in the place. So what we did is we just observed and learned that that water is not being intended for drinking. You have to buy a separate drinking water. Okay? So even you yourself, you can experience a lot of things like that. Do not act at once. Do not react at once. Study first, observe your environment before reacting, and try to learn for the social interactions of one another. Since we, as people, we are socially constructed individual. Okay, is that clear? Anything more? Now, basically, the importance of thinking to symbolic interaction is always being reflected in two important views of objects. Meron tayong dalawang importanteng views. Now, according to Bloomer, he differentiates among the three types of objects. There are three important types of objects. One, physical object. Two, we have abstract object. Three, we have social object. When we say so, physical object, yan lahat na nahawakan natin. We have the table, the chair, the bed, anything around you that are considered tangible, that can be touched. They are physical objects. But when we say social objects, of course, the people around you, your student, your parents, your friends, and so on and so forth. And when we say abstract object, these are just only ideas or moral principles, like about love, about honesty, about simplicity, and so on and so forth. Now, these objects are simply as things out there in the real world. But when we try to look at it, each object that we are talking about has its own meaning to all of us. So meaning, different objects have different meaning for different individuals. I repeat, different objects have different meanings for different individuals. So meaning, your view here is considered as relativistic. I repeat, relativistic point of view. That means each one of us can see that object, can see different object with different meaning for the different individuals. Okay? Now, a tree will be a different object for a botanist, for a lumberman, for a poet, or even a home gardener. Why? For a botanist, the tree is very important. But for a lumberman, they just need the lumber in order to make a tree. For a poet, the tree is very beautiful as an inspiration for them to create or for him to create a certain poem. And for a home gardener, love should be given to these trees. Okay, that is the first view, which is the relativistic point of view. And the last one is the looking glass cell. When I say looking glass cell, this concept was developed by the theorist Charles Horton Cooley. I repeat, Charles Horton Cooley. This looking glass cell is being summed up as we see ourselves as others see us. I repeat, we see ourselves as others see us. If someone will tell you, oh, you are great and you are wonderful and beautiful, what will you say? Oh, hindi naman. With humility, hindi naman. But when you have seen and you have noticed that many of those people keep on repeating that you are really great, beautiful, and wonderful, that particular image is being developed into you. That I am really beautiful, great, and wonderful. But if the people will tell you negative thing, you are foolish, you are poor, so what will happen to you? It will also affect your personality. It can degrade yourself. So that is what we mean by looking glass self by Charles Horton Cooley. We see ourselves and how others see us. It affects us. Really, we are socially constructed. But take note, these people are just people around you. But still, same, we are creating our own self. Let us try to get the good ones and get rid of the poor of the bad things, but rather look at the positive things that can really improve us as a better individual and as a better future educator someday. Okay, did you learn something from this session from Module 1? Hopefully, we can learn more in the succeeding modules that we are about to handle. So for the meantime, let us look forward on the next module, which is the 4 pillars of education. And they said it's no longer 4, but there are 5 pillars of education. So God bless everyone and stay safe. Bye.